November 13th, 2019, Creve Coeur, Missouri, a quiet, upscale suburb, the kind of place where people expect stability, safety, the comfort of knowing what tomorrow looks like. Detectives are standing outside a 2,000-square-foot home, about to execute a search warrant. Waiting inside, calm, composed, is the homeowner, a young chemical engineer named Bo Rothell. Just one day earlier, Bo called 911, his voice full of worry. He told the dispatcher his pregnant wife, Jennifer, had left for work that morning and never made it to the office. Her phone was dead. Nobody at her job had heard from her. Not long after, he went on Facebook and posted a public plea, begging friends and neighbors to help search for her. On paper, it looked exactly like what you'd expect from a terrified husband. But the second investigators step through that front door on November 13th, that picture starts falling apart fast. Because in cases like this, it's rarely the crime itself that gives someone away. It's the panicked attempt to clean it up afterward. Instead of chaos, investigators walk into a house that's unnervingly spotless, and one smell that hits everyone the second they're inside. It's the middle of November, freezing temperatures, a snowstorm rolling through, ice covering every road. And yet, somehow, one window in that house is wide open. If you're into true crime documentaries that dig into the details most people never hear about, this is exactly where you want to be. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because we cover true crime cases like this one every single week. At the bottom of the basement stairs, an industrial fan is running full blast, blowing freezing air directly onto a section of soaked carpet. The whole area reeks of bleach, strong enough to make officers' eyes water. When they lift the edge of that carpet, what's underneath will change the entire direction of this investigation. This is the story of a man trained to solve problems with precision, logic, and control. And what happens when that same mindset gets turned towards something far darker than an engineering formula? Let's stick to the facts. Beneath that damp carpet, spread across the concrete floor, was a massive dark red stain. Something someone had clearly tried and failed to scrub away completely. And Bo's reaction to that discovery changed everything. Investigators asked him for a DNA sample, just to rule him out or figure out whose blood had soaked into that concrete. He said no. They asked for his phone, to check his call records and see who Jennifer had been in contact with last. Again, no. They asked to search his car parked outside. Once more, he refused. Think about how sharply that contrasts with the man from 24 hours earlier, the one publicly begging the internet to help find his pregnant wife. Now he was calmly blocking investigators at every single turn. While that standoff played out inside the house, crime scene techs were working the property outside. In the family's outdoor trash bin, they found several empty containers of industrial-strength cleaning chemicals, a pair of used heavy-duty rubber gloves, and a pile of dirty paper towels. Right on top, a fresh receipt from a nearby grocery store. The timestamp told investigators everything. Every one of those cleaning supplies had been purchased the exact same day Jennifer disappeared. At this point, Jennifer was still officially missing. Her car had already turned up abandoned in a commercial parking lot. Her purse gone, but her phone left behind on the seat. What investigators had was a house that strongly suggested someone had gone to serious lengths to erase physical evidence. To understand how this story ends with a soaked carpet and the smell of bleach, we have to go back several years. Jennifer was 29 years old when all this happened. She and Bo met around age 20 at the University of Missouri, crossing paths in engineering classes. Both of them ended up with degrees in chemical engineering, but that's about where the similarities stopped. Jennifer was outgoing, energetic, the type who could strike up a conversation with anyone in the room. She built friendships easily and loved being around people. Bo was the opposite, quiet, reserved, more comfortable fading into the background than standing out. It's worth paying attention to their shared profession here, because engineering is built around predictable outcomes, structured systems, and control. In a lot of ways, that's exactly how both of them approached life, like a carefully planned project where every step logically led to the next. And for a while, that's exactly how it went. They graduated. Bo landed a solid position at a respected engineering firm. Jennifer built her own successful career. On September 26, 2015, after 4 years together, they got married. Over time, they saved up and bought the same home in Creve Coeur that investigators would later search. Successful careers, a beautiful house, financial stability. The foundation looked complete. The next step, according to the life they'd mapped out together, was starting a family. That's where the carefully calculated plan started to break down. After a long series of medical evaluations, Jennifer was diagnosed with endometriosis, a condition that made conceiving naturally extremely difficult. And how do two people trained to solve problems with precision and data respond to a physical obstacle like that?
They don't wait around. They work through it methodically. That's exactly what happened.
Life became an exhausting cycle of specialist visits, medical tests, treatment plans, follow-up appointments. Their private life lost all sense of spontaneity. It became another task, scheduled around calendars and medical recommendations. And month after month, every new test came back with the same disappointing result. By the beginning of summer 2019, they both realized they'd hit a wall. Together, they decided to take a break from treatment, hoping stepping away would relieve some of the pressure they'd been putting on themselves. But it didn't work the way they'd hoped. Instead, once the one shared goal that had been holding them together disappeared, a real emotional distance opened up between them. Weekend plans got less frequent. Everyday arguments became more common. Before long, the marriage had become little more than a performance for relatives and co-workers. Jennifer still believed they could fix it. She kept looking for ways to reconnect, to rebuild what they'd lost. Bo saw it completely differently. To him, the project called family wasn't working anymore, and instead of trying to repair it, he started looking for a way out, approaching the whole thing with cold, calculated logic. While Jennifer was trying to save the marriage, Bo was already following a completely different plan. By May of that same year, he'd started an affair. Here's something that's always stood out to me about cases like this. Sometimes people whose careers revolve around logic and precision try to organize human relationships the exact same way they'd organize a technical problem. Have you ever imagined putting your own marriage through a cost-benefit analysis? Bo actually did. In September, he sat down and wrote out, by hand, a literal list of advantages and disadvantages of leaving his wife. 2 columns on a single sheet of paper. Under advantages, things like a fresh start and improved personal life. But it's the disadvantages column that really says something. Not one line about love, emotional connection, or the life they'd built together. Instead, it was about money and image. Divorce is expensive. He'd lose half his assets. His family would be disappointed. He was weighing money, status, and reputation against the idea of walking away. And at that point, the cost of divorce and the fear of losing his family's respect outweighed the desire to actually leave. The legal solution came with a price tag he wasn't willing to pay. Then, at the end of October, everything changed. On October 26th, Jennifer took another pregnancy test. This time, positive. After everything they'd been through, it happened naturally, right after they'd stopped centering their entire lives around appointments and treatments. For Jennifer, this felt like the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. That evening, she decided to surprise Bo. She ordered dinner, started recording on her phone, and when he walked to the door to meet the delivery driver, she was standing there, holding the positive test. The camera caught what should have been one of the happiest moments of their lives. Instead, Bo's expression goes stiff, uncomfortable, distant. Later, he'll claim he just hates being on camera. Jennifer doesn't buy it. The truth about how he really felt shows up somewhere far more revealing. His text messages. The day after learning about the pregnancy, Bo messages the woman he'd been seeing. He tells her he's completely shocked, that it feels like everything around him is falling apart, that part of him doesn't even want this pregnancy. A day later, he tells her the relationship is over, but only on paper. The two of them keep talking regularly. A few days later, exhausted by his cold reaction, Jennifer opens her browser and searches one heartbreaking question. What to do if your husband seems upset about your pregnancy? She has no idea another woman is already part of the picture. Then, on November 3rd, Bo meets up with his girlfriend again. Afterward, he sends her a message laying out 3 possible paths forward. Option 1, stay with Jennifer, raise the baby. Option 2, admit to the affair, pack his things, go through a difficult divorce. Option 3 is the one that stands out. In his own words, he says he's hoping for a miscarriage, or something like that. From that point forward, everything changes. He'd realized the pregnancy would make ending the marriage even more expensive, that ongoing support payments would become part of his future. The one outcome that would let him keep the house, protect his money, and preserve his image as the perfect husband wasn't something that existed within the boundaries of the law. Now let's go back to that freezing day in November 2019, to the moment investigators pulled a fresh receipt out of the family's outdoor trash can. People in highly technical professions are known for their attention to detail, but real investigations show the same pattern over and over. When someone's under extreme pressure, even the most analytical mind slips up on the simplest things. Think about that for a second. Someone can spend hours calculating the financial impact of a divorce, mapping out every possible outcome down to the dollar, and still forget to get rid of one ordinary receipt that ends up pointing investigators exactly where they need to go. Officers collected that receipt and drove straight to the grocery store printed across the top. At the store, they pulled surveillance footage from the previous 24 hours. And there's Bo, late at night, before Jennifer had even officially been reported missing, before anyone knew anything had happened, standing calmly at the checkout. No panic, no urgency, quietly paying for several gallons of industrial-strength bleach and a pair of heavy-duty rubber gloves. And the evidence kept building. Bo's locked phone didn't slow investigators down for long. Instead of fighting the passcode, detectives pulled his call and messaging records directly from his cell carrier. Reviewing months of outgoing calls and texts, one number stood out immediately. It was the number Bo had contacted more than anyone else. Not long after, the owner of that number walked into the police station on her own. She was the woman Bo had been planning a future with. She sat down with detectives, unlocked her phone, and handed over their entire message history voluntarily. Those same texts, his shock over the pregnancy, the 3 paths he'd laid out, were now sitting on a detective's desk. What had once been a private conversation had become powerful evidence of motive. The woman told investigators she had no idea what had happened to Jennifer, and said she'd only learned about the search through the local news. Meanwhile, the crime lab finished testing that dark stain from the garage floor. Since detectives didn't have a direct DNA sample from Jennifer, they collected reference samples from her parents for comparison. The results left no room for doubt, a complete genetic match. All that bleach, the fan running non-stop, the wide-open window in freezing weather, none of it mattered. The science told the same story anyway. On November 15th, the investigation shifted entirely. Police were no longer looking for a missing person. Bo Rothell was formally charged with second-degree murder. The judge set his bond at $500,000, took his passport into custody, and barred him from any contact with Jennifer's family. But investigators still had one critical piece missing. They hadn't found Jennifer. Without her, proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a jury would be much harder. Defense attorneys can always point to the absence of a recovered victim. Inside the detention facility, the pressure kept building. Hour after hour, detectives confronted Bo with receipts, records, growing mountains of evidence. Finally, on November 18th, after watching every carefully built plan collapse under the weight of it all, Bo broke. Just before midnight, he agreed to cooperate, giving investigators precise coordinates, a wooded area near a major highway, about 45 miles from their home. Let's rewind a few days. Monday, November 11th. Jennifer's at home, walking toward the staircase leading down to the garage. According to investigators, that's where Bo was waiting. Using the evidence, detectives reconstructed what happened with remarkable precision. It started with a forceful blow from a blunt object. Jennifer was seriously hurt, but still conscious, disoriented, struggling to stay on her feet. Here's where this case takes a turn. A lot of people imagine crimes like this happening in one uncontrollable burst of emotion, but the evidence told investigators something very different. The blows weren't delivered back to back in a frantic rush. There was a real pause between them. During that window, Bo had every opportunity to stop, to call for help, to make a different choice. Investigators concluded that instead, he stayed at the scene, assessed the situation, and chose to continue. The second strike caused catastrophic injuries. Forensic specialists later determined the trauma was consistent with a powerful impact from a heavy object, likely a large baseball bat. Jennifer collapsed near the bottom of the staircase. Instead of calling for help, prosecutors say Bo turned his attention to something else entirely. The same man who'd calculated the financial cost of divorce on paper was now focused on eliminating the source of that cost. According to investigators, once Jennifer had passed away, he began removing evidence, taking off her clothing, trying to limit forensic transfer, placing her in the trunk of his car, and driving far from the neighborhood before dumping the scene entirely. In a remote wooded area near the highway, he didn't even try to bury her or seriously hide what happened. He left her on the frozen ground and walked away. By the time search teams reached the location, exposure to the elements and wildlife had significantly altered the remains. For investigators, that scene said everything. No sign of remorse, no indication he struggled with what he'd done, just a shift in focus toward covering his tracks. After leaving the scene, he went home, cleaned the garage floor, and started building the story he was hoping everyone would believe. Now let's jump ahead to April 2022. Bo Rothell's trial is underway. By this point, the defense knows flat-out denial isn't a realistic strategy anymore. The digital evidence, the phone records, the surveillance footage, the forensic testing. It's all already been introduced in court, building a timeline that's nearly impossible to challenge. So, the defense shifts to a strategy that's been used in courtrooms for decades. Instead of arguing no crime happened, they try to convince the jury it wasn't planned, hoping to soften the charge. Bo takes the stand and gives his own version of that November evening. He tells the jury he decided to come clean about the affair because he wanted to clear his conscience. According to his testimony, Jennifer became extremely upset, demanded to know who the other woman was, and then told him something that he claims completely changed everything. He alleges the pregnancy wasn't his. He tells the courtroom that hearing that made him lose control, that he grabbed a wooden mallet left out from recent home repairs and struck Jennifer in a state of overwhelming shock. Blaming someone who can't respond is a position nobody can directly challenge. It shifts responsibility away from him and asks the jury to see him as a man who simply reacted in the moment. But courtrooms don't run on dramatic stories, they run on evidence, and the prosecutor starts dismantling his account piece by piece. First, they challenge his claim that he genuinely tried to end the affair. Phone records show he stayed in regular contact with the other woman, right up until his arrest. There was no real attempt to cut ties. Then prosecutors bring back the same text messages investigators had recovered earlier, the ones where Bo openly says he's hoping the pregnancy doesn't continue. With every new piece of evidence, the image of a devoted husband pushed past his limits gets harder and harder to believe. Then the prosecution turns to the mechanics of the crime itself. Relying on medical and forensic evidence, the prosecutor shows the jury a critical inconsistency. The injuries documented during the investigation couldn't have come from the small finishing hammer Bo claims he used. Even with maximum force, that tool simply couldn't produce that level of trauma. The prosecution argues the weapon he described was nothing more than a story meant to make the crime look less intentional. But the strongest evidence against him isn't the weapon, it's the timeline. Medical experts documented a real pause between the two strikes. And the prosecutor asks Bo the one question that cuts straight through his entire defense. If this was truly an uncontrollable emotional outburst, why did he stop, wait, and then strike again? The courtroom waits. No answer comes. Bo stays silent. In that moment, the defense's entire explanation loses whatever credibility it had left. The jury takes just 3 hours to reach a decision, remarkably fast for a trial of this size. The verdict is unanimous, guilty of first-degree murder. The judge hands down the maximum sentence allowed by law, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. For Jennifer's family, it finally brings the legal process to a close. Looking back, the whole calculation that started with betrayal ends in total failure. A man with a technical mind, consumed by the fear of losing his money and his image, made lists, weighed financial risks, convinced himself he could outsmart the whole system. Instead, he lost everything: his career, his financial security, his reputation, his future. The comfortable home he fought so hard to protect was replaced by a prison cell where he'll spend the rest of his life. An ending that even all of his careful calculations never saw coming. What do you think? Did the evidence leave any real doubt? Or was this case decided the moment investigators opened that trash can? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if cases like this keep you hooked, make sure you're subscribed for the next true crime documentary.